For centuries, the foundation of America's society has rested in the hands of workers. Factory workers drive the economy with the goods they produce. Farmers grow food, and teachers prepare young generations for the future. All of these workers unite, hand in hand, to promote the well-being of society, but work hasn't always been this honorable. During America's Industrial Revolution, many bosses exploited their workers, especially those who were children. They denied child laborers basic working rights, like fair wages, reasonable hours, and safe working conditions. Many people turned a blind eye, but a few brave individuals exposed child labor and worked to end it. One of these courageous crusaders was photographer Lewis Hine. In the midst of America's Industrial Revolution, Lewis Hine, a photographer of child laborers, acted as a driving force in the fight against child labor and aided the initiation of children's working rights in the Fair Labor Standards Act, despite opposition. The Industrial Revolution was a time of development, prosperity, and production that refined the ways Americans worked. It began in Britain during the 1700s, but soon spread to America. Advances in agricultural technology, such as the cotton gin, allowed for larger harvests, and less farmers were needed in the fields. At the same time, factories began to arise in cities. Unneeded farmers flocked to these factories for jobs. Unfortunately, the work proved less promising than it sounded. Factory jobs provided very little pay, disastrous working conditions, and long hours. Children were forced to get jobs to support their family. According to the 1870 U.S. Census, 750,000 individuals under 15 years of age worked in jobs unrelated to agriculture. The public didn't seem to understand the negative effects of working children. Most parents of child laborers were either too tempted by the extra money to pass it up, or thought that the early work experience would aid their children in the future. In fact, it was very detrimental to their lives. It often caused their health and education to lag dramatically. In one case, a 12-year-old boy named Charlie Burton worked in a North Carolina mill over a 12-hour night shift for 60 cents a day. The horrible conditions stunted his growth. He was malnourished and hadn't grown for 5 years. America needed a reformer to fix the long hours, low wages, and unsafe working conditions that child laborers endured. In 1874, Lewis Hine was born in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, to 2 coffee shop owners. When he was 18, Hine's father died, forcing him to go to work in an upholstery factory to support his family. He earned $4 for every 13-hour day and worked 6 days a week, working long hours for little pay like most young workers. Later, the factory closed up and Hine was out of work. He searched for odd jobs around town and worked at a clothing shop, a water filter company, and as a janitor at a bank. Even though Hine seemed stuck in poverty, his luck soon changed. He met Professor Frank Manny, who inspired him to attend college and study education. Afterwards, in 1901, Manny was named superintendent of New York City's innovative ethical culture school, and he hired Hine as a teacher of geography and nature study. Teaching taught Hine how to interact with children and gain their trust. While teaching, Hine had his first experience with a camera. He used it to capture school events and kept it in the classroom. He learned the fundamentals of taking shots, developing pictures, and the aesthetics that go into photographic art. He was so enthralled by photography that he set up a photography club for his students. On the weekends, Hine worked on his own photography project at Ellis Island. At the time, many U.S. citizens were angered by incoming immigrants, saying they were taking American jobs. These immigrants lacked almost everything, except their family and a few belongings, making them poor and misunderstood. Manny, Hine's colleague, sympathized with them, and Hine said, Frank Manny writes that he remembers having strong desires to have the children of later days feel the same regard for Ellis Island that they had then for Plymouth Rock. With the assistance of Frank Manny, Hine traveled to Ellis Island and photographed the incoming immigrants. His photographs followed Manny's vision, showing the immigrants' vulnerability as they came to shore with little in their name. The pictures he took at Ellis Island were his first steps in using the camera as a method to change people's perspectives and teach them about the injustice in the world. The National Child Labor Committee saw these photos and felt confident that Louis Hine and his camera could change society's views on child labor in the same way. Established in 1904, the National Child Labor Committee strives to ensure rights and education for working children. In 1908, they offered Louis Hine a job as an investigative photographer in its campaign to outlaw child labor. Even though this ended his teaching career, he said, "I held that I was merely changing the educational efforts from the schoolroom to the world." He traveled over 100,000 miles across America, lugging around a basic 5x7-inch camera with glass plate negatives and magnesium flash powder for lighting. He took pictures of impoverished child laborers and provided a revolutionary look at the problem of working children. Hine made sure to put careful, honest effort into his work. "All along I had to be doubly sure that my photo data was 100% pure, no retouching or fakery of any kind." His honesty drew people in, helping them understand the problem of child labor and causing them to feel for the children depicted in the pictures. Though Hine worked for the greater good, he faced opposition, mostly from parents and bosses of child laborers. Many parents liked their children working. On the other hand, most factory owners weren't eager to let Hine in to exploit their businesses. One boss threw Hine out as soon as he tried to take a picture of the children, and another boss gathered up a young worker and avoided Hine, saying, "He isn't working here, just came in to help a little." Even though most bosses denied Hine entrance into businesses, he found alternative routes inside. Sometimes he posed as a fire inspector or an insurance salesman. Oftentimes, he claimed he was there to photograph machines and needed a child in his picture for scale. He took so long to set up his equipment that the distrustful bosses left him to his work, giving him a chance to interview the children. Inconspicuously, he recorded shorthand notes on a pad in his pocket. He also knew the lengths between the buttons on his coat, which he used to measure the children. Hine felt that it was his responsibility to work for the freedom of these children, saying, "I'm sure I am right in my choice of work. My child labor photos have already set the authorities to work to see if such things can be possible." His photographs certainly did affect those who saw them. A 1911 Alabama journalist reflected on Hine's pictures, saying, "There has been no more convincing proof of the absolute necessity of child labor laws. They speak far more eloquently than any written work, and depict a state of affairs which is terrible in its reality, terrible to encounter, terrible to admit that such things exist in civilized community." Hine's 5,000 accounts of child labor changed society's view on the subject by opening their eyes to what really happened behind closed factory doors. He showed the hard work child laborers endured, and also the innocence they still had. He pushed for compulsory education for children so that they could acquire skills for jobs instead of being stuck in mind-numbing labor. Some states had already passed weak laws against child labor that were easily skirted, but true abolition of child labor required a national law. Congress tried twice to pass laws restricting child labor, but each time the Supreme Court declared them unconstitutional. Finally, in 1938, Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which prevented any workers under 16 from working full-time and gained rights for young workers, such as the rights to minimum wage, fair hours, and safe working conditions. According to the National Child Labor Committee, Hine outraged the public and shamed the government into acting. This was a revolutionary moment for working children. No longer would they be oppressed and without rights. Louis Hine went on to photograph the construction of the Empire State Building and the work of the Red Cross, but no photographs were more memorable than his work on child labor. From textbooks to child labor laws, Louis Hine's work can be seen standing prominently in modern society. Hine stood strong against opposers to gain children working rights, armed with only his camera and his morals. The National Child Labor Committee, Hine's past employer, commemorates his dedication by presenting 10 individuals each year with the Louis Hine Award for their outstanding work with young people. Even though he died in poverty, Louis Hine's legacy lives on.